Hello. Thank you for joining me for my second podcast, or whatever this is. I don't really know what it is yet. I might have a title, though. I thought of a good title last night. Having a normal one. That's a good title, isn't it? Sorry, that's Fred. You can hear in the background. I had a very exciting week this week. I got a package in the post, and it had the name Fred Sargeant on it. He very kindly sent me that. Pure maple syrup from Vermont, where Fred lives, and from where he joins us now, if I can get this button right. Yeah, we did it. Hi, Fred. How are you?
Hi. Very good.
Thank you so much for the gift. It was extremely kind. What did you say? It's from your own farm or something?
It was from a place that we owned previously, and they still do the sugaring there.
I knew you were responsible in some way, and I just wanted to. We didn't want to have any sugar bush truthers getting in touch with us later on. Fred, for the benefit of people who are not steeped in this debate around women's rights that's going on at the moment, that some people are not even aware of, and LGBT rights, of course, can you explain to us who you are and why you're involved in this fight?
Well, I had been involved in Stonewall at the very start of the riot and remained there throughout the night. And we had worked on organizing over the next few days for demonstrations. And, we were there night after night after night. But we were able to speak to a number of people that were there each of those nights who wanted to do something more. And some people did it spontaneously on their own. Eventually, another much larger group grew out of all those discussions, and that was the Gay Liberation Front.
Right. But before we move on to what grew out of it, can you briefly explain to people who don't know about it? I mean, I think we should do two interviews. You recommended a book to me yesterday, David Carter's Stonewall. And it looks amazing, and I would love to speak to you again when I've had a read of it, and I can ask questions with a bit more depth. But for the moment, let's pretend that I'm an idiot. Really, just do your best and explain to me and an audience what was Stonewall, why was it important, and what form did it take? Was it a small riot? Was it a series of riots? Just explain that as best you can.
Sure. The Stonewall bar was a mafia-run bar on Christopher Street in Greenwich Village. And I had been in there once very early on when I first moved to New York, and quickly recognized that it was not a place I ever wanted to go to again. It was a dump. And I wasn't really a bar person, so it wasn't something that had any appeal.
And of course, it had a mafia connection, so that must have been slightly.
No, I didn't know the mafia connection. Right. I didn't know about that at first, but after I had settled down in New York, I met Craig Rodwell and went to work with him in his bookshop, which was the Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookshop. It was a lesbian and gay bookshop, the first one in the world. And, that was our daily enterprise, and we conducted our activism from that locale.
Can I ask, at this stage, what state were gay rights in at this particular stage, before the Stonewall riots?
Well, the gay rights movement had started out very, very small back in the 50s. There's always been some kind of discussion going on. And that's what it was more like then, a discussion group held in living rooms and that sort of thing. People were afraid. They used pseudonyms. They rarely used their own name. Even the people that they worked with didn't know who they really were.
That's very familiar to the women who are in the gender critical women who are in this current fight that we'll talk about later. But
precisely the same thing. Yes.
Yeah. So it was a very scary time to be a gay man.
Yeah, and I was very young. So when you're young, you can also be very foolish while being inspired at the same time. And I used my name. I sat in the shop every day. I greeted people, had an argument or two with the cops that would come by and try to shake us down. as they used to do back then.
I guess when you came to New York, it must have been, it must have kind of made you feel a lot more confident and excited about, and meeting people like Craig. You must have felt like a whole new world was opening up.
Craig was really inspiring. He was one of the pioneers of the early gay rights movement when they left the living rooms and salons and started engaging in militant action. He had protested at Whitehall Induction Center in New York, which was where you went when you were drafted. He led one of the first major demonstrations called the Sip-In, which was based on sit-ins, yes, where they went around to different bars in New York trying to get served as homosexuals. Right. It was illegal that they were homosexual. They were considered to be disorderly people, and therefore you couldn't serve them.
Right.
So he went into a bar called Julius's, which is quite famous today, and they denied him service. And from that action, they were able to bring a case to the state liquor authority and then change that law so that gays could be served in bars again.
So, so you're kind of part of the scene around Christopher Street. Christopher Street was where the Stonewall bar was. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, I lived a block off of Christopher Street, and right, about 2 blocks down was the Stonewall.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so can you tell me about the night it happened and how it happened? I mean, yeah, how it happened from your point of view, excuse me.
Well, we were coming home from a dinner date, and we were walking by the bar as we normally would, and we could see that there was a crowd just starting to gather out front. And, you could hear a penny being thrown here, there, but nothing really was happening.
People were throwing pennies?
Yeah, they were saying to the cops, "Here's your payoff."
Oh, right. Yes, because it was a mafia bar, so the cops were being paid by the...
That's right, that's right.
Yes. I only know all this because I've been watching The Deuce, David Simon's TV show about the period after that, I think. But yes, so they were throwing coins and they were accusing cops of taking bribes. How many cops were there at that point?
They were mostly inside the building. We didn't know how many were in there. There was an attempt to bring prisoners out at that point, and the crowd got tense.
Yes.
And we'd all, at some point or another, if you lived in the village, you had seen a raid going on. There were regular occurrences, but there was something different about this raid.
Yes.
And what made it different was when they tried to drag Stormy DeLaravay over to the paddy wagon, and she went down and then was screaming at us, "Why won't you guys do something?" And that's when all hell broke loose. People began yelling at the cops, throwing things at the cops, eventually driving them back into the building. One person went over to the tobacco shop across Sheridan Square and got some lighter fluid and came back and lit the door on fire.
No.
Windows started to break on the bar and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it was then there was a real melee going on. But the cops were inside, and they were truly in fear of their life. The inspector in charge had to walk around to each of the officers to tell them to shoulder their arms, because he didn't want somebody to get shot, knowing that there was probably nobody there that had a gun. Gay people weren't known for carrying guns back then.
Yeah. And
not until it became a cop, anyway.
Sorry, what did you say?
Not until it became a cop, anyway.
Right. I want to ask you about that as well. But can I ask, just leading up to to that moment, where did all this tension and anger come from? What were the cops doing? If the cops were getting their payoff from the bar, then why were they bothering the gay clientele? Because
there were also political influences, and as election times would come around, there would usually be an order that would go out to suppress the bars. If there was a big convention in town, they would suppress the bars. And the mafia cooperated with that. They paid off, but they also knew that they had to play the game so that it could look like the politicians were doing something about the fags.
Right, right. So this was one of those cleanup operations.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, the problem here was that the operation came from uptown in a midtown unit, and they did not inform the 6th Precinct, who were notoriously involved with the mafia, that they were coming. And when they sent out their call for help, no one came at first. It was only when they got commands from Police Plaza or wherever it was then, I think that's a newer building, that the 6th Precinct did respond.
Right. So while this all sounds like the going across the road to getting the lighter fluid to the door going on fire. This all sounds like it probably happened very quickly. How many minutes? How long did the whole thing last from top to tail?
It lasted throughout the night. We stayed. One of the things that we did, there was a bank of phones. I don't know if they exist anymore, of pay phones by the subway entrance, and we called every newsroom that we could get a hold of somebody at and told them what was happening. This was like immediately around the other side of Christopher Park, where I'm talking about. And so we were there throughout that time until dawn.
And the policemen were still inside the building?
Yeah, the police were inside the building. It was when the reinforcements came that they tried to make their way out again. And that's when the riot really started to go. It was already underway, but the intensity increased.
Right. So when you arrived, you said that you saw was it Masha Johnson? Is that her name?
Oh no, she wasn't there then. It was about, according to her, it was about a half an hour later. I did see her. My partner then, Craig, had nudged me at one point and pointed down the street towards Sherman Square, and Marcia just dropped a soggy bag of garbage on an empty police car, which didn't strike me as particularly brave because we were all in front of the Stonewall dealing with the actual cops.
Well, everyone's got to do their bit. Did the riot take the form of a standoff with the cops, or did the riot take the form of... It feels to me like it was very cop-focused.
In fact, this riot was somewhat unique for riots. The only damage occurred at the Stonewall. There was no... people weren't attacked. It was really directed all at the police.
Right.
And they understood that.
Yeah. And how was it diffused? How did it diffuse? And did people just get tired and go home?
People got tired. Dawn came and we went home and worked on our first leaflet, and we were back hours later, after maybe a nap, and we started leafleting because we wanted a demonstration that night. We were successful. A lot of people showed up. A lot of people didn't show up as a result of our leaflet. They had just heard about the riot and they came. Martha Shelley, who she's one of the great figures there, she had actually walked by the riot and she was with a friend and she said, "Oh, this kind of thing goes on in New York all the time." Then when she found out more about what we were doing, she came back the next day with, I have no idea how many people, but they all helped.
Wow. Right. And how many days of action were there?
It went through to midweek. It started that Friday night, and it was one night of rain, which kind of dampened things. But then there was a story, a homophobic story that was published in the Village Voice, and that prompted another demonstration. The Village Voice's main office was just a couple of doors down from the Stonewall, so of course the demonstration was right back there, and it became a mini riot, but it was more of a demonstration than a riot.
That surprises me that the Village Voice printed something homophobic. I always thought they were very liberal, and but I guess it was a different time.
Oh, not then. No. You couldn't use. We tried to use the word gay or homosexual in our advertising, and we had to advertise as a bookshop, and I forget exactly how Craig used to word things, but anybody gay reading the ad would know, oh, this is a gay bookshop.
Right. Okay. Okay.
It passed the censors in the advertising department.
Right. 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 Wow. All righty. So let me. So things have diffused a little bit. I guess by now our conversation's going on in the background with the police. Was it at this point that a friendlier relationship with the police started to form, or would that take another couple of years?
Gee, I don't think there's even a friendly relationship with the police today.
Oh, really? I thought things might have calmed, or the riots were a kind of sign that you know, LGBT people couldn't be pushed around anymore.
Yeah, they had discovered that was going to be the case going forward. The idea of community relations wasn't something in the police lexicon at the time.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
We had to demand what we got from them.
Yeah.
In fact, when we went to get the permit for the march, they didn't deliver it to the apartment until the morning of the march.
Right. I was thinking that because I was thinking that I often say to people that you and your contemporaries at the time, Fred, were doing this when it was not remotely safe to do so. So to see you and your contemporaries referred to as transphobes now by the likes of Pink News is particularly galling, you know, because they are enjoying the freedoms that people like you fought for, and people like you, you know, literally put your neck on the line for. You know, you could have been physically assaulted for these stances you were taking. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I think it's an important point. Can we talk a little bit about, I just want to make sure I pronounce her name correctly, it's Stormay.
Stormay, yes.
Stormay, yes. Now, the interesting thing about Stormay, well, let's get into it by talking about I think the reason I think the first thing I saw by you actually, Fred, which I'll share screen actually, and I'll show people the tweet. This may have been the first tweet I saw by you. Yeah, here we go. So I think this might have been when I first heard of you, Fred, or maybe it was definitely around when we first started communicating. Where you say here, I saw Stormay during the Stonewall riots. She was a butch lesbian, not trans. Harper's Bazaar is not only comfortable with the decision to reinvent Stormay as a he, they're comfortable with any distress it causes the lesbian community. Now, this was around the time that I was beginning to become aware of many things to do with the trans debate, but partly because of you and partly because of a lot of lesbians, I realized that Stormay was being posthumously transed. Stormay was being claimed as a trans person, whereas in fact she was a butch lesbian. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh yeah. I just saw it yesterday. Someone was tweeting about you must use Stormy's preferred pronoun he.
Yeah.
A demand that everyone start using he with Stormay. The effort to trans her and others has been ongoing. I worry about myself, but I think
yes,
tweeted enough where, you know.
The beard means you could be a trans woman like Alex Drummond. That's a possibility.
Well, my beard is grandfathered. I grew my beard before woke culture.
Okay. Well, that's okay. Oh yeah, sorry. No, I'm not casting aspersions on beards at the moment. I know you know. I am a little beard phobic, just slightly. So Stormay, by shouting, "Why don't you do something?" I mean, that sounds to me like the match that lit the fire. That sounds to me like the start of it, the Stonewall riots proper. So. I mean,
that's when it went from coin throwing to garbage throwing.
Right. So basically, Stormay was the one who started it. I mean, in terms of in terms of making it happen. She was the catalyst.
That's right.
Yeah. So a butch lesbian was the catalyst for the Stonewall riots. This is something that we on the gender critical side, you'll know this, Fred, better than anyone, have to keep repeating to people, because they all think in this current ideology that because Stormé wore a suit sometimes or a hat, that they were a man. They're actually a man in a woman's body. It's the most craziest thing. And the other thing is, it's extremely insulting to lesbians. I know you have a very close relationship with lesbians who you were around at the time. And I know that the relationship between gay men and lesbians has not always been the smoothest thing. There's a lot of pressure points in different areas. I wouldn't presume to talk about it because it's very much not my area as a straight man. But I know that you've always felt a particular fondness for lesbians and a particular concern for how they're represented and how their history is represented. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. I'd love to. The one of the reasons why I got involved in this was I went to an event last year having to do with Stonewall 50, and I haven't been to something like that in years. And I was stunned by the focus on transgenderism and genders and the whole spectrum of things that I was unaware of, and literally no emphasis on lesbians who were so important and to what we all did. And I'm really shamed by the idea that part of our history has been almost completely erased. It isn't the first thing that comes to anybody's mind, and it should be.
My supervillain origin story, Fred, is that when I came to London, the two people who took care of me were these two butch lesbian sisters, and they were extremely lovely to me. And even though I was an absolute idiot, a 19-year-old idiot who didn't know his arse from his elbow, they took pity on me, and they helped me get to grips with London. I wonder, should I say their name? Would that get them in trouble? No, they'll probably be hunted down by psychopaths, so I won't say their name. But they were. I always had a special feeling for lesbians, if that makes sense. Very unlike the special feeling that most straight men have for lesbians. And it always kind of really hurt me when I saw them ignored. Magdalene Burns was another one. Magdalene Burns was so angry and frustrated at having to defend her reality, but against trans-identified men who were saying in a variety of different ways. I urge people to watch her videos, and you'll see how it was done. But these young lesbians were being coerced and gaslit into believing that certain men, and we're not talking about transsexual, we're talking about fully intact men, were actually women. And if you didn't at least consider having a relationship with these fully intact men, then you were a bigot. And Magdalene Burns, in all her videos, fought like a tiger against this idea. And I remember one day I said to her, why is this happening? How can this happen? How can the LGBT movement so completely betray one of the first letters, And she said, no one cares about lesbians, And it really broke my heart. It really broke my heart because I saw how true it was. Because no one was paying any attention to this appalling coercion that they were receiving, Anyway, sorry, this is supposed to be an interview with you. But Stormé is one of the most famous victims of this dismissal and erasure of lesbians, I would say. Would you?
It's to me one of the most stark examples of what's been happening to all lesbians.
Yes.
No matter what they've done, it gets ignored in favor of some action by a man. Yes. And it's over and over and over. So going back to that event that I went to, as I concluded my remarks, I said, the one thing I'd like to leave you with is that first Pride, the person that made the proposal to the organization that approved it was a lesbian by the name of Ellen Brody.
Mm.
You should know her name.
Mm.
Well, people didn't know her name.
Yes.
It's what's been so frustrating to me that such central figures have been erased from the history in favor of people who weren't there.
Yes, yes. And this is something that, like, I think this speaks to as well the the idea that it's somehow okay to tell a lie about history if it elevates a group of people who are seen as oppressed. And they don't realize that it doesn't matter if you're the left or the right. If you're lying about, if you're engaged in revisionism, you're doing something terrible. You're doing something absolutely terrible. I think that it's not just a attack on lesbians. I think there's always been a kind of dismissal of female experiences and reality. You know, the lesbians are just at the very, very sharpest end of that generalized hatred of women. I remember when the film came out in the UK called Suffragette, there were lots of people complaining about it. And the reason they were complaining about it, this movie that's about the first wave of feminism that completely, revolutionized the world for women. It's apparently good for white feminism, but bad for intersectionality, you know?
Yes.
And it's like women can't have a single thing for themselves before someone steps in to say, why aren't you talking about this other oppressed group? You know, as if women aren't historically the most hard done by group there is.
There was a feeling at the time as we were organizing after Stonewall to move towards Pride that we should involve ourselves with other groups as more of a collaboration march of different oppressed peoples. And it was Craig and a number of others who said, no, we really need to stand on our own 2 feet here so that people recognize who we are. And then, of course, we can help other people. And that happened over the years. We've gotten burned in the process. The LGBT community, but at large back then, had very little to do with the drag community because in many cases they were straight men. So, it's just, you stayed away from it. You acknowledged them. They were in the parks, that sort of thing. But it wasn't something that, generally speaking, LGBT people engaged with.
Yes.
The ones that were around the park by the Stonewall were doing sex work, as were other young men. But they were distinct from our group. And later, after the movement developed, in the idea of inclusiveness, people decided, and this is after I left the movement, people decided that this was something we needed to broaden our group with, make it an umbrella.
Yes.
And trans people were then included as people who were oppressed.
Which makes absolute sense.
To me at the time, I thought, fine, if we can do something to help somebody, that's a good thing.
Yes, absolutely, and I think that at that time you probably thought, as I believe the majority of people now think, mistakenly think, that the word trans means transsexual. But of course, as you and I know, Fred, the word trans can now mean literally anything. It's a word that, and therefore the word transphobia can mean literally anything. So it's a kind of elastic political concept that you can jump in and out of at will and take advantage of.
It's one of those questions that I ask constantly, which is, can you define transphobia for me?
Yeah.
And I never get an answer.
Yeah, and I never get an answer.
Amorphous.
And trans, can someone define trans? Because like Stonewall, their famous umbrella includes cross-dressers in the category of trans. So the idea that they're putting a person like Pippa Bunce who I love mentioning because it's one of the craziest things. Do you know the Pippa Buns story?
No.
Pippa Buns. I love telling everyone this because it's just to see people's faces. Pippa Buns identifies as a woman only a few days a week at their work. So a few days a week comes in as a woman, and then the other few days comes in as a man, right? And the Financial Times, no less, gives him the award of one of the 100 women in business. You know, and the idea that someone like Pippa Buns has anything to do with...
But he only gets the award on certain days, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. He has to hand it back. He has to go back 3 times a week to hand it back. But the idea that someone like Pippa Buns, that experience can be remotely compared to someone who deeply suffers gender dysphoria to such an extent that they will have an operation. A very, very what's the word that they used when they? I heard a word used when they went after my testicle tried to kill me a couple of years ago, Fred, and they had to take it out. But it was kind of I believe it's kind of an invasive operation. I'm not sure if that's the exact word, but it's an operation that really digs down and gets in there. And if you're going to put yourself through that deliberately, because I'd really rather not have gone through that. There has to be something driving you, something real, you know, a terrible, terrible feeling that's real to you that you need to fix your body. But
sure.
But to compare that to someone like Pippa Buns is the most, apart from anything else, it's a huge insult to transsexual people.
Well, what's happened in a lot of places, including I just saw something over in the UK where there's a young person, I don't know, 19, 20, 21, something like that, who identifies as a reindeer. And,
I saw him. Yeah. He's the Twitch moderator.
And it's amazing how far it's gone to the absurd.
Yeah. Well, you know,
seriously, around here in Vermont, we all know that deer with antlers are male.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't want to shoot one of them during the season by mistake, you know. You got to be very careful what you identify as. But the thing that'll get us in trouble. That'll be reported in Pink News as we're planning to hunt trans people. But yeah. So this umbrella is super wide now. It includes everyone. It's a word also. Another word that I think is a terrible word is queer, because here's a word that's used as a slur, that was used as a slur, and now I see straight people appropriating it. You know, it's the most, again, it's like why are people over here at the moment? There's a big controversy going on about Ali G and another comedian, Keith Lemon, I think his name is. Sorry, no, it is Keith Lemon, but he did a Pro Selecta. There was these 2 comedy characters, and they were making fun of Ali G. You know Ali G, making fun of white people who think they're black, and they've had to apologize for this cultural appropriation. But no one has to apologize to women for the appropriation that they're suffering at the moment. Pippa Buns goes in with a wig on, and suddenly he's one of the 100 women in business of the year.
Yeah.
It's so insulting, and it's so insulting to gay people as well. I won't speak for you, Fred, but what do you think of the word queer in general?
I reject it
Right.
for a number of reasons. It was always a slur when I was a young man, and it's not used necessarily today as a compliment.
Yes.
People will still call us queers.
Yes.
And it's a word that's associated with pedophilia, and due to the writings of Michel Foucault, and it's something that I don't want to have any part of.
Yes.
That's why I say, I'm done with the TQ plus I and all the rest of it.
Yes. What would you say to people who are saying that the word queer is reclaiming the word, or cleaning it up, I guess, so that it's
do something else?
Well, use something else. Yes, absolutely. Let's move on to the attempted hit job by Pink News. Now, it is true that you you did become a policeman after Stonewall. Is that right?
That's right.
How long after Stonewall did you become a policeman?
It was about 4 years.
And were you out to your fellow officers?
Not in the sense that we think about today. People knew that I was gay. In fact, during that period, I married. The woman that I married, she knew that I was gay before we married. I was going through my procreative years, and that was the way you did it back then.
Wow, why?
What's that?
Why? Why was that the way you did it back then?
It was the only way you could do it back then. If you wanted to have children, you could not adopt or any of those things.
Oh, I see. So it was kind of a negotiation.
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. Okay, so how old are your kids now?
40s.
So you must have at this stage so after a few years of working with the police, and after having spent your younger years on Christopher Street and so on, you were now seeing both sides of you were seeing the people who were having you were one of the people throwing the coins, and now you were one of the people who were having the coins thrown at them, although I'm not saying you took bribes for it. But what was that like, straddling those two worlds?
Well, that era in policing was just a few years after the King riots in the late 60s. And policing started to make a change then for the better. I don't think they've continued as well as they could have over the years, but things were changing.
Yes.
And I wanted to be a part of that. I felt I could bring something to it, an understanding that other people wouldn't have had, in the same way that a black officer can bring something to the job that a white officer can't.
Right. And were you successful, do you think, in your career? Were you happy that you did do that?
Yeah, it led me to work with people in the NYPD who were involved with what was very new then, hostage negotiation. So
Okay.
I brought that principle back to Connecticut and formed the first unit there. I was a new lieutenant at the time.
Right. Of course, you had after keeping the policeman trapped in the Stonewall bar, you had a lot of experience in hostage negotiation on both sides.
That's right.
Recently, you made a tweet. I mean, you and I know how Pink News works. Pink News is kind of a magazine. I'll explain it to people who aren't steeped in this. It's kind of a gay online or an online magazine that is supposedly for LGBT people, but has just realized there's more money to be made in kind of giving over to the T completely. I think there's a trans section, but there's no lesbian and gay section, famously, in Pink News. And the way they work is they find someone who they want to take down, and they find a tweet or an interview. I did an interview with Derek Jensen, which I'll link to in the comments, where I talked about the fact that I was proud that I wasn't bending while there was so much pressure on me to get out of this fight. And I said, it's one of those questions that we ask ourselves: how would we have been if it was if we'd lived during, in the late 30s in Germany? What would we have done? Would we have stood by while others were losing their jobs and their livelihoods, or would we have done something? And being a bit of a twat, I said, I feel like I've answered that question, and I feel pretty good about it, And this became Ray Linehan calls trans activists Nazis, something like that. Can you explain what they've done to you? Because I knew they were coming for you, Fred. I knew they'd come for you.
They would have to. What drives totalitarianism, and that's the way I see the present day situation in the gay movement, the former gay movement, is that totalitarians have taken over, and everyone is to subsume their issues to the head of the group. Yes. In this case, it's now T with Q people involved as well.
Yeah, and the rest of the alphabet.
Well, for instance, I just called a local gay group that I hadn't had any contact with over the years. With this, how I like to do a simple question, and I asked them, "What do you have for elderly gay people?" And they recommended that I contact one of their members that could put me in touch with some 40-year-olds. And I said, 40-year-olds have nothing to do with me. That's not what I asked you about.
Yeah.
What about the old people?
Yeah,
old lesbians and old gay men. What do you got for them? Well, after back and forth, they finally said nothing. They have nothing. I looked through their organizational chart, and of the 12 board members, there are no gay men. There is one woman who is their attorney, and everybody identifies on a spectrum.
Right.
Of their leadership team, there is no gay man, no lesbian. It is strictly everybody identifying on a spectrum and calling themselves queer. So these organizations have no place for us, but they still draw from us. That's where they get their legitimacy from what we originally created. And what they're doing now is being rejected, not only in your country, but here.
Yes, I know there was a poll recently that said, shockingly, that even young people are beginning to there's beginning to be a drop in support for LGBT people recently, and I don't think that's a real drop in support for LGBT people. I think that's a drop in support for these authoritarian lunatics who are
that's exactly correct.
Yeah, they're doing so much damage. They're doing so much damage at the moment, and Pink News decided to try and come for you by claiming that you said that the shooting of one of the black people who led to one of the recent riots was a good thing. I think that's what you call it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. I can explain
what we're trying to say. Yeah.
As a hostage negotiator, my inclination was always to talk first and to try to get the situation to calm down. The way I used to explain it was I was selling a product, and it was a product that nobody wanted to buy because they were going to end up going to jail. So it took time to do something like that. But those principles go out the window when somebody is in the midst of chopping someone else up. And the man involved had already murdered one young black man and was in the process of murdering a second.
Can I just quickly say that it's very important for people to understand that we're not talking about about George. Excuse me, his name is George.
No.
We're not talking about the man.
Different circumstance.
Yes,
that was an innocent man that was cut down.
But George, what Pink News did was they tried to make it look like you were talking about George Floyd, when in fact you were talking about a completely different situation.
That's right.
And in fact, I believe that the person who the police shot in the other story made an hour-long video where he said, "You're going to have to kill me. I'm not going back to prison." Isn't that right?
Yeah, I have no concerns about what the pink propagandists are doing, because none of what they say is based on the whole truth. What they do is they pick a word here, they pick a word there, they add them together, shake, stir, and they've got what they want to give you. But it's not related to the truth, because the truth wouldn't work for them.
Yes, I knew they would try and come after you.
Well, they even said that I had, I believe from the headline, that I was approving the fact that a white officer had killed a black man. Up until then, I didn't know who the officer was, whether it was a man, a woman, black or white. It didn't matter, because what the officer had to do in that situation was stop the murder.
Yes.
And it's not.
He had murdered one black person, and he was about to murder another one, and the police.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
Okay. Why do you think? Why is it so important? Let's finish by asking, why is it so important that we don't lie about the past? That we don't try and make it different from what it was? Why is that an important principle?
Well, I'm going to say something that probably the people at Pink News are not going to like, but it's important to tell the story of Stonewall and say that trans people had no involvement in what developed out of that. They did not lead anything there. The truth about the past is important so that those who were there and created the modern gay rights movement, LGBT people, are not erased from the story in favor of people who played no role.
Yes, yes. With Stormay being the most egregious example of that, I think.
That's the thing that really breaks my heart.
Yes, yes, yes. And also, I think personally, one of the things that I tell people about this is, yesterday was such an insane day with Trump at one point saying that George Floyd was looking down, smiling about the jobs numbers.
Awful.
Awful. And a series of crazy things. And then earlier in that same day, I saw someone, I didn't know whether it was a policeman or not, but he was on a motorbike and he was wearing leathers and he was set on fire, And today I've seen another policeman, black policeman, being beaten up by a group of white people. And it seems to me important that we really need to know what's going on. We need to know what the truth is from moment to moment. Because if we don't know what the truth is from moment to moment, then people like Trump, narcissistic, malignant grifters, can take advantage because they can destabilize our idea of what is and isn't reality. So I just want to, I guess I just think it starts with the past. If you start lying about the past, for which we have all this information that we can use to research and find these things out, then we really are sunk. Because once you start lying about the past, you can lie about anything. And as we know, that's what's happening every day. People are lying about everything all the time.
I didn't come into this casually because when I told you about that event, I spent 6 months reading and looking up everything I could about what had happened, while I was living in retirement.
Yes.
And I was appalled. I was struck by the misogyny and the homophobia of the transgender leadership, and that somehow my past has been taken to support that.
Yes.
And I feel compelled to say what happened, not what people want to believe today to further a narrative.
Yes, yes. Well, I even the work you've been doing on Twitter has been, I know it's an imperfect medium. It doesn't like women, for instance, as we know. Many of our friends have been banned from the service. But I think you've been doing a fantastic job at balancing the books, I guess, with people like Pink News and people and unfortunately Stonewall UK trying to muddy the waters.
Yeah, you see, they have a problem with people who will only speak the truth. Because that's not what they're about.
No, absolutely. And I hope you keep doing it. And I hope that when I've finished David Carter's book, we can come back and have another chat about this and dive deeper into some of the issues.
And when you finish David Carter's book, read it again, because you're going to miss a lot. There's just so much in there.
Oh God, the first couple of pages are unbelievable. It's like the whole series of The Deuce in 4 pages. It's hilarious. You should watch The Deuce. I think you'd like it. You might get a bit of a kind of nostalgic buzz out of it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, sir. Well, lovely to talk to you, and thank you again for my wonderful Vermont maple syrup. I will treasure it for as long as it lasts.